In 1985, a girl disappeared from her own bedroom in the middle of the night. Her sister, who was sleeping in the same bed with her, said something very strange. Someone with a wizard hat took her. This case remained unsolved for 35 years, until the truth finally came out in 2024. Before we start this story, drop a comment and share which city in the world you're watching from today. Take 1 second to support the channel by hitting the subscribe button for free. The Rivera family lived in a modest home in Long Beach, California. Jessica Rivera was born on December 3, 1981, in South Carolina. She was the youngest in her family. She had 2 sisters and 1 brother. Shortly after her birth, Jessica's parents divorced. Her mother, Debbie, had to raise all 4 children by herself. The family lived in Edmond, a small town near the state capital. It was quite difficult for Debbie to take care of all her children without any support, but despite this, the family was tightly bonded. While Debbie worked, the older children looked after little Jessica. In her free time, Debbie tried to do something fun with her children. On June 5, 1986, Jessica and her siblings were playing in the yard. When evening came, they ate dinner together and Debbie put the children to bed. Since Jessica was little, she usually slept in the same bed with her mother. But that night her brother's ear was hurting, so Debbie decided to have him sleep in her own bed. Jessica slept in the same bed with her other sister. The next morning around 9 o'clock, Debbie woke up. Rebecca, the 6-year-old who had slept in the same bed with Jessica, went to her mother's room asking her to make breakfast. As soon as Debbie came out of her room, she noticed something odd. The front door, which she locked every night before bed, was wide open, and the dogs, who usually stayed outside, were running around inside the house. When she asked her oldest daughter where her sisters were, Rebecca replied, "She's gone. A bearded man and someone with a magic hat took her." The mother, thinking her 6-year-old daughter was just joking, thought maybe her daughter had gone outside to play in the yard, but she wasn't there. Hoping Jessica was just playing hide and seek, she searched the entire house but realized Jessica wasn't home. The mother ran back to the girl's room and started demanding Rebecca tell her where her sister was. When the girl kept repeating the same thing about the man with the wizard hat, Debbie started losing her patience. She asked why she didn't scream for help if someone was taking her little sister from the house. Rebecca explained that she woke up in the middle of the night and saw a bearded man with a wizard hat next to their beds, but because she didn't fully understand what was happening, she got scared and covered her head with the blanket, thinking it was just a strange dream. Understanding that Rebecca was probably telling the truth, the mother immediately called the police. The police searched the entire house and concluded that she had indeed been kidnapped. The perpetrator had entered the house through the living room window by removing the screen. They discovered a fingerprint on the outside of the glass and submitted the image to experts. By the window, police found a pack of cigarettes and several cigarette butts. Investigators placed a recording device on Debbie's phone in case the kidnapper might call with a ransom demand. Police listened to Rebecca's statement, and the girl told them the same story about the man with the wizard hat. But she hadn't seen the kidnapper's face, so her description didn't help the investigators. No matches were found from the fingerprints. The police asked Debbie to tell them all the events of the previous day in the finest detail. Debbie mentioned someone she suspected. Just a few days ago, she had ended her relationship with a man she'd been dating for a few months. According to Debbie, the man was aggressive and controlling and wasn't happy with Debbie's decision to end the relationship, so she thought he might have decided to get revenge by taking her daughter. Police decided to investigate him, but couldn't find any evidence linking him to the crime. They also checked Jessica's father, but he had been living out of state for a long time and couldn't have kidnapped his daughter. They began scanning the area around her house. The house was outside the city and there were fields stretching for miles around it. Police searched abandoned buildings, forests, streams, and rivers, as well as other places where Jessica could potentially be found. The next day, the FBI joined the investigation, but they still couldn't find any trace of the missing girl. Police started distributing flyers not only in nearby towns, but throughout the entire state. The search continued for several days. Debbie, with 3 children to look after, couldn't go out and search for her daughter, and the police rarely spoke with her, only responding when she reached out to them. Debbie had started to believe that the police weren't making enough effort to find her daughter, so with each passing day she was losing more and more hope of finding Jessica alive. 10 weeks after Jessica's disappearance, police faced a series of crimes. A man had broken into someone's home, but the homeowner had used a gun to scare him away. Later, this man stole a van and went to North Carolina, where he broke into a sleeping woman's house and attacked her. This man was arrested, and after his fingerprints were entered into the database, investigators obtained a perfect match with the prints on the window at Jessica's house. The man was 27-year-old Thomas McDowell, and as soon as Debbie learned this, things got even more complicated. Because Debbie said she knew this person. She had met him through relatives. Another interesting fact was that Thomas had a beard and always wore a long cowboy hat, but investigators had a big problem. Despite the fingerprint match, they found this evidence insufficient for prosecution, because he had previously worked on Debbie's property for 2 days. Such a possibility was quite unlikely, but the fingerprint could have been left then. But when Debbie's children wanted to tell her something while playing in the yard, they would lean their hands on this open window and yell. Since the children's hands were almost always dirty, Debbie constantly had to clean the glass. Thomas had worked on her property about 6 months before the kidnapping. But all these facts didn't convince the police. They continued to believe there wasn't enough evidence to press charges against Thomas. Thomas was convicted in 1987 for assaulting the woman whose home he broke into and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Although Debbie was devastated by the fact that police refused to charge him with kidnapping, there was nothing she could do about it. That same year, something stranger happened. Thomas's cellmate contacted the police and said Thomas had confessed to him about a crime he committed. He had kidnapped a little girl from her own bedroom in South Carolina. While committing this terrible act, he killed her in anger because the victim bit him. Thomas dismembered the remains, took them to a field, and left them there. Investigators spoke with him, and Thomas said he was willing to confess if they would grant him full immunity. Authorities obviously couldn't accept such terms, so once again the police came away empty-handed. Debbie was once again shocked by the fact that Thomas was allowed to escape justice. She decided to conduct her own investigation and found an abandoned car that belonged to Thomas. On one of the seats, she noticed threads and fabric fibers that matched the color of the pajamas Jessica was wearing the night she disappeared. The police didn't rush to follow up on this clue. It seemed strange that Debbie could find fabric particles in a car without special equipment or forensic science knowledge. In 1987, Kansas police contacted local investigators to report they had found a girl matching Jessica's description. However, this child was not Jessica. Over the following years, Debbie gave several interviews in which she accused the police of ignoring the obvious suspect, but this didn't produce any significant results. In 2007, 21 years after Jessica's disappearance, her mother once again publicly accused the local police department of inaction. This time, she gave journalists a recording of a conversation she had with the sheriff, where he told her he could call his men back and forget about this case. Debbie also complained that for years, she had tried to get other agencies involved in this case, but each time the local prosecutor's office blocked these attempts. That same year, in 2007, they reviewed the case and confirmed that at that time they didn't have sufficient evidence to press charges against anyone. In 2014, the sheriff faced charges related to fraud and bribery, which led to his dismissal and a 12-month prison sentence. In 2021, 35 years after Jessica's disappearance, a new sheriff named Jay Kuhn reopened the investigation with the FBI's help. 50 agents were assigned to this case, reviewing all available evidence and searching for new clues. In the end, they not only concluded that there was sufficient evidence against Thomas McDowell, but they also discovered new circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime. Relatives and friends revealed that the man had drastically changed his appearance after Jessica's disappearance, shaving his beard and long hair and giving up his favorite cowboy hat. They also said he smoked the same brand of cigarettes as those found next to Jessica's house. Unfortunately, experts couldn't find any DNA traces on these pieces of evidence, probably because they had been tested many times in the past, which may have erased any biological traces. While all these factors increased suspicion against Thomas, the key evidence was the fingerprint and the statement from his former cellmate. Finally, detectives believed they had enough evidence to take the case to court, and in January 2022, Thomas was finally arrested. 62-year-old Thomas refused to plead guilty and preparation for trial took several years. It only began in January 2024, and Thomas's lawyers tried to challenge the available evidence. They claimed the fingerprint on the glass was left when Thomas was working on the property. The defense also tried to use Rebecca's statement. As you'll recall, Jessica's sister said she saw a man with a wizard hat. Thomas's lawyers tried to convince everyone that the girl couldn't confuse a cowboy hat with a wizard hat because they are completely different. However, experts brought by the prosecution pointed out that the fingerprint was clearly fresh. If it had been left several months before the kidnapping, it would have either been wiped away or altered by weather conditions. During the hearing, a former inmate also testified and repeated the confession Thomas made in prison in 1987. The prosecution noted that it was unlikely that a stranger from another state would know the details of the case. Moreover, that year Thomas himself said he was willing to confess but wanted full immunity, which obviously wasn't an option. The trial ended on February 8th, and the jury unanimously found Thomas guilty. The 63-year-old was sentenced to life in prison. Debbie, who had been convinced of his guilt since the early years of the investigation, was pleased that the perpetrator finally faced accountability, but said Thomas could have been arrested 36 years ago. Instead, police allowed him to live a long life before being brought to justice. Throughout all these years, Debbie still can't come to terms with the fact that her daughter's remains were never found, but after nearly 40 years, the chance of finding her daughter is quite slim. If you want more unsolved mysteries that have defied explanation for decades despite all the research, subscribe to Mr. Mystery.